All right, it's 31 past 10. Let's get this session kick-started. We're presenting on here on behalf of Bumble on the total addressable market and the market penetration, and basically how we are marrying internal data and external geospatial data. Let me first give you a bit of an outline. We'll introduce ourselves. Then we're going to why we did actually embark on this project. Marcos then goes through the more technical stuff of the city cluster generation, the calculation of the population, and we'll wrap up with all the use cases that this will enable and a little bit of a future roadmap of what this project, or let's just call it even a work stream, has to hold. First of all, what better way to introduce ourselves than by our own Bumble profiles? I'm Bobby, leading business insights in Bumble. Quite passionate about data visualization, storytelling, design thinking. In my personal life, I really quite like board games, pub quizzes, reading.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm Marcos, I'm 29, originally from Argentina. I'm passionate about data and I'm passionate about geography, as you can imagine. Yeah, here my profile is not very fulfilled, so don't follow my example here. The more filled your profile is in Bumble, the more likely you're getting matches. So, but yeah, I'm passionate about tennis and football. I'm a sports fan.
Yeah, profile completion for us is important. So
Yeah.
Marco's profile doesn't really cut it right now. Still needs to fill it up a bit. So let's introduce Bumble. Basically, as Bumble, we're the overarching company having two different apps. We have our flagship Bumble app, predominantly in English-speaking countries, and we've got our second app, Badoo. And both of these apps are operating under the Bumble umbrella. Our mission is to create a world of healthy and equitable relationships. And currently, we're operating in over 150 plus countries in 85 languages. And we've been on quite a bit of a journey. We went from private to private equity owned in 2020. Then we went public in February. So we've been quite on a roller coaster journey. So it's been a really, really interesting time at Bumble. Enough about Bumble. Let's get to the project itself. So if we look a little bit on the right side of the slide, historically, we've looked mainly at active users, monthly active users or daily active users. And obviously, because you have geographies of very different sizes, the United States having a massive population, Brazil having a massive population, but other places like Singapore or Israel being much smaller in population, you don't really know what your market penetration is if you have a certain amount of monthly active users on your platform. So if you look at this fictional example here, right, and all these numbers are made up, if we have a user base of 1.5 million in the United States, what does that mean? Is that a lot? Is that a little? What's our potential to grow? Have we tapped that market? We don't really know. At the same time, if we have 1 million people in Spain, is that a lot compared to the United States? So we needed that new perspective to sort of contextualize whether our monthly active users did actually mean whether we had tapped the market or not. And hence we introduced the concept of TAM, of total addressable market, and the market penetration, where we could really look at the United States. If you have 1.5 million users on your platform, but an entire market that you can tap in is about 200 million, then you've less than 1% of that market on your platform. So that means you have a massive opportunity still to grow. Well, if you look at Spain, for instance, with a market penetration of 12.5%, you kind of know that that growth that you could anticipate is probably going to be a lot fewer. So we really embarked on this project to basically contextualize our user numbers and to see whether we could use total addressable market and market penetration for different growth projects. On to Marcos.
Thank you, Bobby. I want to walk you through the road to market penetration estimation. So the top layer definition is very simple. It's the division of the number of active users in a given month over the population. But we partnered with Carto because we wanted to understand the population, not only the overall population or over 18 population, but we also wanted to understand it at different levels for different genders, for different age bands, and we're also calculating it at different geo levels. We want to understand the population at a country level, of course, but we also want to understand the population at the city cluster or at the metro level, and I will walk you through how we generated the city clusters of metropolitan areas. Why? City polygons in general, in most of the geo databases, are very narrow and fail to capture the big picture. For example, the New York City area is divided into Manhattan, Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, etc. It's great to have that level of granularity, but when you want to understand the big picture, you want to have a different solution to understand market penetration, for example. So how we tackle this issue, we used dbScan, a density-based clustering algorithm, and convex and concave hulls. And we built a model that captures for each country and its city clusters the most densely populated areas automatically. So this is a snapshot of the road to market penetration estimation. So we start with coordinates. We then run the dbScan algorithm. On top of the generated clusters, we use the convex hull algorithm using Python, and then we enrich those new generated polygons using Carto. So here, this is a snapshot, a screenshot of Carto Builder, the map visualizer we use. And here we can see points of interest related to food, like restaurants, bars, in the northeast coast of the US. So here you can see a lot of points, and here you can pretty much understand the distribution. And human eye can pretty much understand where the metro areas are, but we needed to generate a shape for each of those. So after running the dbScan algorithm and the convex hull, we generated polygons that captured the metropolitan areas pretty much. So here we can see 4 metropolitan areas: New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. Here, this is a little bit a more detailed view on how the model works. First of all, it generates or it separates the cluster point, and then on top of that, we run the convex hull algorithm for each of the metropolitan areas to basically understand where are the boundaries, and then we generate a shape to capture that new area. So here is a more detailed look into the US, and here we can see that the model captured the majority of the metropolitan areas across the country. And yeah, we can run this not only for the US, but for all countries around the world. So how do we estimate population? Now that we understand where are our metropolitan areas, we need to understand the population. So we are using the Carto spatial features dataset and powered by data enrichment, which is the process of augmenting data with new variables using spatial joins. We have extracted each city, cluster, or metropolitan area's total population, disaggregated by age band and gender. So it's very simple. We are using Carto frames, which is the Carto Python library. So here, as you can see, in 2 cells, we managed to enrich this data set and calculate the population. In the first cell, we can see that we just fetched the data set from the Carto Data Observatory. It's called spatial features. And in the second step, we basically enrich our city clusters data set with the chosen variable. So there you can see in the variables parameter that we chose to fetch total population, female 20 to 24, a male 20 to 24, up to 64-year-old. And for countries, it's actually very simple. Here we didn't need to generate a new shape because we understand the country boundaries. So it's very simple using Carto frames here. We just fetch the data set again, and as a second step, we just query the data set, grouping by country, and it returns the population by country, etc. as an output, we were able to solve the division. Of course, we have the number of active users in a given month at the city cluster level, at the country level, but we now have also population split by country and city, and also split by gender and age band. Thanks. Bobby?
Sure. So how are we going to be using this now? What use cases does it enable? So first of all, on the right-hand side, we're going to be using this for growth and international expansion. We want to see, because we know that kind of market growth is kind of a function of how heavily and densely penetrated a market is. So we're really using this right now for market growth. And we're using it for internationalization to get a sense what countries have a total addressable market. What market have we already penetrated there? And obviously by pulling in different data sources on GDP, purchasing power, you can kind of get a sense what markets constitute a big opportunity for us. In the middle, we're using it for intra-market growth. Sometimes you can go attack a complete market, but a lot of markets have different city clusters of metropolitan areas, where you may want to take an approach focusing on those different metro areas. Well, we can use now those city clusters that Marcus just talked about and get a sense which market areas we're doing well in. How highly have we penetrated New York? Have we tapped the potential there? And if so, have we done that as well in the West? If our market penetration is higher in New York than in LA, for instance, we kind of know we've probably got bigger growth opportunities there. And lastly, we're using this for segment-based opportunities. As we can now have the TAM and the market penetration on an age band gender level, we can get much more granular. We can really see whether there are outlier cities where we see that we're underperforming for Gen Zs compared to how big the market there is. Or cities where we're overperforming for millennials or Gen X. So by using this data, we can get a sense of to what generations we need to cater to and adapt our content, our communication, and all our marketing efforts accordingly. And so these are the current use cases that this enables. But what does the future hold for us here? First of all, we really want to democratize TAM through self-service analytics. And you can think of self-service analytics through exposing this in dashboards. So all sorts of business users can download it to Excel or generate their custom reports on top of it. But we also have quite a big analyst community at Bumble. So for us, democratizing here also means that we do that catering towards the different consumption patterns. So making sure this is very easily queryable in our data warehouse. So analysts can take it in to all of their custom analysis. Secondly, we want to incorporate a couple of different lenses. So the TAM that you saw really related to the entire 18 to 64 population, which is kind of a ceiling of what we can probably achieve. If you think about Bumble as a dating product, for instance, you probably want to reduce that TAM by overlaying singles. Or you probably want to get a sense of, well, what is the total population willing to use dating apps? So one future road to take is that we'll want to make these overlays and offer them in self-service solutions as well. So that business users, depending on their use case, are we looking for Bumble Date? Are we looking more for Bumble for Friends, which could tap into a wider TAM, and that you can make those adjustments accordingly. And lastly, we're using it in a lot of different other projects. We're probably using it to get a bit of a sense what stage projects are, of markets are. We're using it to base some of our planning efforts around. So the TAM work has really enabled a lot of new projects and a lot of new innovation within Bumble. And I guess lastly, right, we have over 100 open positions, so we're always looking for new talent. And if you're interested in joining Bumble, if you want to know more, reach out to any of us. Reach out to Kieran, who is also in the audience. Probably doesn't want me addressing him right now. Tap us on the shoulder or go to our website. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I guess we probably got some time for Q&A as well. So if anyone has a question.
Interesting and insightful, thank you. All right, oh, sorry. Yeah, really interesting and insightful, thank you. I was just trying to understand, when you kind of did your a cluster and you have the outline for each area, do you check, or how do you ensure, it wasn't quite clear, that that overlays directly with the Carto, is it the Carto data set?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you know that your area overlaps, you're looking at the same kind of
So
region?
basically the clustering step happens before we use or utilize the Carto dataset. So the clustering step is to generate a shape or an area that basically encapsulates cities across the New York City area, right? So for example, we generated, as you probably saw, New York City, we clustered Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, etc. Once we generated that data set, we enriched it and we calculated the total population in that area using Carto external data set. So we use these spatial joins from Carto to calculate the number of people living there.
I see. So you use the outline
Exactly.
to work out.
Exactly.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So one of the slides that you showed, so I think it showed like POIs around food. Can you talk a little bit about how you got and are using that data? You talked about generalizing kind of geospatial clusters, but having the POIs is actually quite interesting. Can you talk a little bit more to that?
So sorry, I cannot hear you. Can you repeat? Sorry.
Yeah. So one of the slides that you showed was around points of interest around food.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more how kind of you came to that data and are using that?
We're just using that data set just as an example here because we cannot share our user coordinates publicly. So we just use it food points of interest as an example.
Yeah. Do you use the total addressable market analytics to feed back to the user experience and improve the app as well for the users?
Do you want to go through that?
Yeah, sure. So, like indirectly, right? Because we want to make sure that in every country that we operate, we have some sort of localization going on. Not every culture is the same. At the same time, if we all have our data centers in Europe, latency can be really, really high. So we want to obviously use that. So we use it indirectly. Once we've got a strong foothold in a certain region, then we may actually decide accordingly. We want to build a bit more of a base there.
All right.
I think all the way in the back there.
So you mentioned being able to filter this data for singles, for example, for certain use cases. Can you tell us a bit more about how you got the data on, or how you defined the level of singles in each area, please?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the data set that Marcus just talked about is not the only external data set that we've been using. I guess one of the sort of interesting results from COVID is that the amount of external data sets that we're using within Bumble has really exploded. We're using stuff from stringency index to cases, vaccination rates, Google mobility data. Also, we're tapping into a survey platform called GWI, Global Web Index, which runs a massive survey all across the globe. 45 countries are operating for a whole range of questions. Obviously, this is secondary research. We're tapping into someone else's research already done. It's great. We don't have to do the effort ourselves. And we can pull that data then into the same tool that Marcus just explained. And GWI has estimates on a country level of how many singles are there. They even have those estimates in certain DMAs, designated metro areas, which is sometimes kind of similar to the city cluster concept that Marcus discussed. So we can use that and pull in that data to make adjustments accordingly.
Very interesting. Thank you.
All right. I think we're out of questions. Thanks everyone for your attention, and I hope it was enjoyable.
Thank you.